we will be discussing about Physics Paper 1, MCQ Paper 2020, May June, Variant is 13 and the subject code is 9702. Number 1. A man is running a race in a straight line. What is an approximate value for his kinetic energy? So kinetic energy is equal to half mv square. So for the man, we consider his mass between 60 to 100 kg, that is the average mass of a man, and its speed is around 10 to 11 meter per second. So after taking a value of 60 and 10, we get the kinetic energy as 300 joules. So this 300 joule is closer to 1000 than to 10,000. So the answer should be C. 2. A sample of gas of mass 4.8 microgram and occupies a volume of 1.2 dm cube. What is the density of the sample of gas? So to find the density is the mass per unit volume and the mass is in kilogram. So we need to convert this in kilogram. Micro means 10 to the power negative 6 and gram, we have to convert gram to kilogram, that is 10 to the power negative 3 kilogram. So this is the mass and the volume. We know that 1 meter is equal to 10 dm. So 1 meter cube is equal to 10 to the power 3 dm cube, that is 1000. So 1000 dm cube is equal to 1 m cube. So 1 dm cube is equal to 1 by 1000 dm cube, 1 by 1000 meter cube. That is 1 dm cube is equal to 1 by 1000 m cube. So we need to multiply this value with 1.2 to calculate the volume in 1.2 dm cube to m cube. Then density is the mass per unit volume. So the density comes to be 4 into 10 to the power negative 6, that is closest to C. So question number 3. Which characteristics are possessed by vector quantity but not by scalar quantity? So vector quantity has magnitude and direction, while scalar quantities have only magnitude. So which quantities are only possessed by vector quantity and not by scalar? So not by scalar means that it would be direction, since vector has magnitude and direction but scalar has no direction. In question number 4, a circuit is set up in the order to determine the resistance of 12 volt and 1.2 watt lamp. So we know the voltage, that is the volt, and the power, that is watt. When operating normally, an analog ammeter and an analog voltmeter are used. Which ranges for meters would be most suitable? So which range of meters would be most suitable? So as we know that there is ammeter and voltmeter range, and we know the volt, that is 12 volt. So 12 volt is in the range that is most suitable is 0 to 20, and for ammeter we need to first find the current. Current is the power by voltage, that comes to be 0.1, and 0.1 is within range, that is 0 to 0.5, that is 0.1 is in this range, but if we consider this range, then 0.1 would be a smallest value and the accuracy is not that much greater. So in this range the 0.1 is more accurate, so the answer should be A. In question number 5, 2 liquid and glass thermometers in a well mixed liquid, so the liquid is well mixed, are individually observed by 10 different students. All agree that one thermometer reads 21 degrees centigrade and the other thermometer reads 23 degrees centigrade. What is the possible explanation for the difference? So why this difference occurs? The liquid is not all at the same temperature. Since it is a well mixed liquid, that means the liquids are at the same temperature. So this statement is wrong. The readings are not precise. As we can see that the difference between the readings are not that much greater, so the readings are precise. That means the readings are close to one another. So this is precise. So this statement is wrong. There is a random error affecting the reading. Now there is no possibility for random error, since they all agree that one has this temperature and the other has this temperature. That means there is no random error, since all agree that the measurement is accurate. So this statement is wrong, but there is systematic error affecting the reading. That means inside the system there must be an error. That means due to wrong calibrated thermometers, the readings are different. So the answer should be D. Number 6. The graph shows how the velocity of the ball varies with time from the moment it hit vertically upwards from the ground. What is the displacement of the ball from the ground after 3 seconds? So initially the ball is at rest at the ground, then it moves upward and then it returns to some point. What is the displacement of the ball after 3 seconds? So after 3 seconds, what is the displacement? Since it is a velocity time graph, so the displacement would be the displacement in this area minus displacement in this area would give the resultant displacement. So the displacement in this area is half into base into height, that is half into 2 into 20, and the displacement in this area is half into, this is 1 and this is 10, so half into 1 into 10. So after subtracting we get the resultant displacement or the displacement of the ball as 15 meter. In question number 7, two students each throw a ball horizontally from the top of a tower. So the ball is thrown horizontally. The two balls are released at the same time. The first student throws her ball with a speed of 20 meter per second and the second student throws his ball with a speed of 10 meter per second. Now this is the speed and this is the horizontal speed since they are thrown horizontally. So it is V horizontal. Assume that the air resistance is negligible. So there is no air resistance and that the ball lands on the horizontal ground. So the ball lands on the ground. Which row describes the horizontal distance traveled and the landing time on the ball on the ground? So first of all, what is the horizontal distance traveled? That means whether it's same or different. So to find the horizontal distance traveled, we can use this formula, that is S is equal to ut plus half at square. And as we know that in the horizontal direction, since there is no air resistance, and also we know that there is no forward force. There is no forward force for the horizontal direction. There is no backward force in the horizontal direction. So the resultant force in the horizontal direction is 0. And since resultant force in the horizontal direction is 0, therefore acceleration in the horizontal direction is 0. So acceleration is 0, and the equation now becomes S is equal to ut because this whole term is 0. So S is equal to ut. Now we can see that since the balls are thrown horizontally and they have different horizontal speed, so different horizontal speed, therefore the horizontal distance must be different due to the different horizontal speed. So it must be different, that is either C or D. Then the landing time. If we consider the landing time, then suppose these are the two balls, then the two balls travel the same vertical height. Since the balls travel the same vertical height, that is SV, so for landing time we should consider the vertical height since they travel, or the vertical velocity since they travel the same vertical height. So for these two balls, they travel the same vertical height, so the vertical height is same. And as we can see that acceleration, if we consider this surface as earth, then the acceleration is 9.81, and since the air resistance is negligible, that means there is no resistive force, that means acceleration is constant, that is 9.81. so acceleration is also same for both the objects, that is 9.81 if the surface is the earth. Then half is always a constant. Then as we can see that the initial speed is also the same for both the objects, since as the balls are thrown horizontally, so so there is a horizontal speed. These speeds are the horizontal speed, and since the balls are thrown horizontally, so the vertical speed is 0, that is VV is 0, and this speed represents the horizontal speed. So since that the horizontal speed and the vertical speed is 0, so for both the objects we can consider that the vertical speed is 0, that means same. So as we can see that as all are same, So time must be the same. So time is also same. So the answer should be C. Question number 8. A ball of mass m travels vertically downwards and then hits the horizontal ground at speed u. It rebounds vertically upward with speed v. The collision lasts at a time delta t. What is the average resultant force exerted on the ball during the collision? So this is our ball. This travels vertically downwards and it hits the surface. So what is the resultant force? We know that resultant force is equal to change in momentum by change in time, and momentum is the mass into velocity by time. Since mass is same, so change in velocity by change in time, mass into change in velocity by change in time. And what is the change in velocity? Suppose the ball is traveling downwards, so its speed is u. Then the ball is moving upward. Since it is moving upward, so for downward movement we take the velocity as positive. So for upward movement the velocity is negative, that is negative u or negative v. So the velocity is negative for upward movement, since for downward it is positive. So since it is moving in opposite direction, so the velocity is negative, and as we know that change in momentum is equal to initial momentum, or change in momentum is equal to final momentum minus initial momentum, or initial momentum minus final momentum. So initial momentum minus final momentum, and for final momentum the velocity is negative. So after subtracting since minus minus becomes plus, so this becomes our equation, and this is the same as option D. Question number 9. The resultant force F on the raindrop of mass m falling vertically with a velocity v given by the equation, that is this equation, where k is a constant. So k is the constant and g is the acceleration of free fall. The falling raindrop eventually reaches a constant terminal velocity. So at terminal velocity we know that the resultant force is 0. That is, the resultant force is 0 at terminal velocity. So at terminal velocity the resultant force is 0, as terminal velocity is the constant velocity, and at constant velocity we know that there is no change in velocity, and since there is no change in velocity there is no change in acceleration, and since there is no acceleration, so the force is 0, since force is equal to mass into acceleration. So acceleration is 0, force is 0, as velocity is constant. So force is 0 and constant is also constant. So we need to just express this equation in the form of terminal velocity, that is v against m. So if we just rearrange this equation, then we can see that after rearranging, v square is equal to mg by k. K is constant, so we left this. Then g is the gravitational phase distance, so it is constant. So we can see that v square is directly proportional to m. Since v square is directly proportional to m, then we know that when mass is 0, velocity is 0, and that means when there is no mass, so velocity is 0. So at mass is 0, velocity is 0, mass is 0, velocity is 0. So these options are wrong. That means the option could be either B or D. So v square against m, the graph would be, if let's suppose if v is directly proportional to m, then the v is directly proportional to m, then the graph would be a straight line. If v is inversely proportional to m, that is v is inversely proportional to m, then the graph would be this shape. And if v is directly proportional to m square, that is v is directly proportional to m square, then instead of being a straight line, since it is a square, so the graph would slightly tilt towards the m-axis. Similarly, if v square, that is v square is directly proportional to m, so the graph, instead of being a straight line, it would slightly tilt towards the v square axis, since it is v square. So v, m, and the graph slightly tilt towards the v axis, that is this shape. So among these diagrams we can see that the option B and C, if we compare option B and D, if we compare, then we can see that v square against m, that is the graph slightly tilts towards the v square axis. Since it is a square of v, so it would slightly tilt towards the v square axis. So option B would be correct and option D is wrong. So the answer should be option B. Since it is v square against m, so instead of being a straight line, it will slightly tilt towards the v square axis, that is towards the v square axis or the v axis, since it is a v square. So since it is a v square, so it will tilt towards the v axis. Question number 10. A ball of mass m moving at a velocity v collides with a stationary ball of mass 2m. So this mass collides with a mass 2m, that is stationary, that is velocity is 0, and initially the m mass has some velocity, that is v, it is m and it is 2m. So the balls stick together. After collision, the balls stick together, so the total mass is 3m. Find which fraction of the initial kinetic energy is lost on the impact. So to find the kinetic energy lost, first of all we need to find what is the final velocity after collision. So momentum before collision is equal to momentum after collision, and the momentum of the small ball, that is mass into velocity, and plus momentum of the big ball, that is 2m into velocity, and since it is at rest, so the velocity is 0, is equal to momentum of the together, that is mass together mass, that is m plus 2m, that is 3m, and we need to find this vx, that is the final velocity. After calculating, we get the final velocity as v by 3. So this is the final velocity after collision. Now, which fraction of the initial kinetic energy lost? So to find the fraction lost, first of all we need to find the initial kinetic energy, that is half mv square, and since initially the small mass is moving with a velocity v and the big mass is at rest, so the initial kinetic energy is also already for the small mass, that is half mv square. So this is the initial kinetic energy. And what is the final kinetic energy? So final kinetic energy is equal to half mv square, that is the half together m, and v square, that is v by 3 square, that is v by 3 square. So after calculating, this is the final kinetic energy, and we need to find which fraction of the initial kinetic energy lost. That means we know the initial kinetic energy and the final kinetic energy, and to find the fraction, that is to find the fraction. What is fraction? Fraction is some value divided by some value, that is the fraction of lost is the fraction of lost, that is lost. So fraction lost, that means lost by initial value. So fraction for the lost is the lost divided by initial value. So what is the lost? Lost is the initial kinetic energy minus final kinetic energy, that is initial is, if we just so initial is half mv square, that is half, and this value minus final kinetic energy, that is this value. So after subtracting, we get the lost, that is this value. So this is the kinetic energy lost. So what is the fraction lost? Fraction loss is the lost divided by the initial value or the total value. So the total value is this mv square by 2. That is, after dividing, we get a fraction, that is 2 by 3. So this fraction of the kinetic energy is lost, that is this fraction of the total energy is lost. So that is 2 by 3. So the answer should be C. Question number 11. A submarine is in equilibrium in a fully submerged position. What causes the upthrust on the submarine? So what is upthrust? Upthrust is the rho Vg, where V is the volume of the object and pressure is equal to force by area. So force is equal to upthrust. Since upthrust is also a force, so force is equal to pressure into area, that is rho Vg into area. That is, what is the area? Area at the top minus area at the bottom. So upthrust becomes rho Vg. This is the definition of upthrust or the equation of upthrust. Then in the option, the what causes the upthrust? The air in the submarine is less dense than the seawater. This is not causing the upthrust, this is just causing the difference in density. then there is a difference in water pressure acting on the top and on the bottom of the submarine. So as we can see that this difference in pressure acts on an area, not per unit area. This difference in pressure acting on an area, so pressure into area is the upthrust, that is rho Vg, and the difference in water pressure at the top and at the bottom means the area of the top and the area of the bottom. So area of the top minus area of the bottom, and height is the volume, so upthrust is equal to rho Vg. So this statement is correct. Then the seawater exerts a greater upward force on the submarine than the weight of the steel. This causes the resultant force, not an upthrust. And since it is at equilibrium, so we know that the resultant force is 0. The submarine disperses its own volume of seawater. This is not the upthrust. So the correct explanation would be that the difference in the water pressure acting on the top and the bottom of the submarine. So the difference in the water pressure on the top and the bottom, that is the difference in pressure, that is the pressure top on the bottom represents the area. So pressure into area is the upthrust, that is pressure into area, that is rho Vg into area of the top minus area of the bottom, that is rho Vg. In question number 12, two forces each of magnitude F, that is this force and this force, act along the edge of the rectangular metal plate as shown. The plate has a length A and width B. What is the torque about point P? So what is the torque? Torque or the moment. So the moment between the two forces is the product of force and the distance between the two forces. So the distance between the two forces. So the product of force, that is the force, and the distance between the two forces, that is B. So FB would be the answer, so the option should be B. In question number 13, a non-uniform rod has a mass of 100 gram. So the rod has a mass of 100 gram. So this is the mass of the rod, and a length of 50 centimeter. So the total length is 50 centimeter, is supported by a chain at its midpoint. So the chain is at the midpoint, that means at approximately 25 cm. The rod is held in equilibrium, that means clockwise moment, that is this clockwise moment is equal to anti-clockwise moment, by having a mass of 60 grams suspended from the right hand end as shown. So this is the mass that is hang. The center of gravity of the rod is at a distance d from the left hand end. So this is the distance d and here is the center of gravity, that means at this point the total weight of the object acts and the total weight is 100 g, or basically if we consider the mass, then the mass cancels each other out. So this is the center of gravity at which the total mass is acting of the rod. So what is the value of d? So what is this distance? To find this distance, so this is the pivot. First of all we need to find the pivot, and this is the pivot since it is hanged by this string or the chain. And what is the clockwise moment? So clockwise moment is equal to 60 g, and the distance is from the pivot is 25 centimeter. So 60 into 25 is equal to anti-clockwise moment. What is the anti-clockwise moment? So the anti-clockwise moment is the 100 gram weight of the rod, that is this rod. So its mass, its weight, and its distance from the pivot is this. Total distance is 25 and this distance is d. So 25 minus d, that is this total distance is 25 and this distance is d. So 25 minus d would give this distance. So this is the distance from the center. So 25 minus d, after calculating we get the value of d as 10. So it would be 10 centimeter. Question number 14, a light rigid rod xy, that is this rod xy, has an object w fixed at one end. The rod is in equilibrium, that means the resultant force is 0 and the resultant moment is 0, resting on the support at z. So it is resting on the support at z and a vertical wall at x. The support exerts a force R on the rod as shown. So the support exerts a force R. The diagram shows the direction but not the magnitude of the forces R and W. So this is the force R and this is the W, but these are not the magnitude. That means these forces are not to scale, but these are only showing the direction. What is the direction of the force on the rod at X? So what is the direction of the force on the rod at X? So first of all, for the weight we have drawn it is horizontal and the vertical component of forces. Then as we can see that this force is acting upwards and this is acting downwards. Then this force is acting in this direction, that is this force is acting in this direction. So to cancel this force, a force must act in this direction. That means the force should be on the right. So the force on the left is removed and it could be either A or D. Then as we know that moment of force is the product of force and the distance, perpendicular distance from the pivot to the line of action of force. So moment of force is the product of force and the perpendicular distance from the pivot, that is this perpendicular distance from the pivot to the line of action of force. So if we consider this system, then what is the moment of force? Since at equilibrium the force is 0 and the resultant moment is 0. So to find the moment, to find our answers, first of all to decide which one is correct, we need to use moment of force, because by forces we have found that B and C is wrong, but by moment of force we can decide that which one is correct, either A or D. So moment of force is equal to force into distance, but what is the pivot? So this point is never be the pivot and we need to find the force X, so it can be the pivot. So the only possible option is Z. So if we consider the Z as the pivot, then as we can see that this force R is acting from the pivot. That means its perpendicular distance from the pivot is 0. So we can ignore this force right now, because its perpendicular distance from the pivot, that is Z, is 0. Then at X some force is acting, and at Y the force, that is perpendicular distance from the pivot, is W cos theta. So this is acting downward. So we know that clockwise moment is equal to anti-clockwise moment. So what would be the anti-clockwise moment about X? So this force must act in this direction, that is this direction. Since W is acting in this direction, so to oppose this force it must act in this direction, because clockwise is equal to anti-clockwise. So the force at X must act in this direction, that is downwards, and also we have found that the force is also acting in this direction to cancel the weight W. So in overall we can see that the resultant of these two forces is acting in this direction, that is correct in option D, that is in this direction. So option A is wrong. So to mainly discuss the key points, that is since the system is in equilibrium, so the resultant force is 0 and the resultant moment is 0, and we know that moment of force is the product of force and the perpendicular distance from the pivot to the line of action of force. So by using moment and force we solve this problem. So the option should be D. Question number 15. Liquid Q has twice the density of liquid R. So if the density of liquid R is rho, then the liquid Q has density 2 rho. At depth X in liquid R, so at depth X in liquid R, the pressure due to liquid is 4 kilopascal. At which depth, that is at which depth in liquid Q is the pressure due to liquid is 7 kilopascal. So we need to find HQ. We know that pressure is equal to rho GH, and for liquid Q, since it has twice the density, and we know that gravitational friction is constant, so we remove this. So liquid Q has twice the density, so 2 rho is equal to 7, since its pressure is 7 by HQ, and we need to find this value of HQ. And for liquid R, the density is rho and the pressure is 4 and the height is x. So after rearranging, that is rho is equal to pressure by height, that is 4 by x. So after making, since rho is common in both equation, so we need to make rho become the subject of formula and then equate these two rho values. Then rearranging this equation, after making h becomes the subject of formula, that is HQ, we get the HQ as 7x by 8. So the answer should be B. A trolley starts from rest at point X it rolls down to y, that is at point y, and eventually comes to rest at z. So it comes to rest at z, that means velocity is 0. It starts with a velocity that is 0 since at rest. Which row is possible summary of the energy changes during the process? At point x, it has velocity 0, that means no kinetic energy, but it is at a greatest height, so it must have some potential energy. Then potential energy is converted to kinetic energy and is moved to y, so kinetic energy and heat energy is also produced. Also, as y is moving upward and comes to z, that means kinetic energy is 0, so at z no kinetic energy is, as we can see that there is no kinetic energy. Also heat energy is produced and it is some vertical height, so gravitational potential energy is also produced. So the option D is correct. 17. A cylinder is heated, causing the air inside to expand at a constant pressure, that is 2.2 into 10 to the power 5. This is the pressure. The expansion of air causes the piston to rise through a vertical distance of 0.5 meter, doing 11 kilojoule of work. Frictional force is negligible. What is the cross-sectional area of the piston? To find the cross-sectional area, we know the value of pressure and we know the work and the distance. So we know that pressure is equal to force by area, and we know we need to find this area, that is this area. So to find the area, we know the pressure, but we need to find the force. So what is the force? We know that work done is equal to force into distance. So force is equal to work done by distance. We know the value of work and the distance. So force is equal to work by distance. We know the value of force. So the area comes to be 1 into 10 to the power negative 1, that is D. Question number 18. A ball slides down a curved track as shown. Point X is at a height of 0.40 meter above Y. The speed of the ball at X is 2.5 meter per second. So at X it has a speed of 2.5 meter per second. Frictional force is negligible, that means there is no work done against friction. What is the speed of the ball at Y? So to find the speed at Y, first of all we know that at X it has some height, so it must have some gravitational potential energy, and as it has some velocity, that means it must have some kinetic energy. So kinetic energy plus gravitational potential energy at point X is equal to kinetic energy at point Y. So what is the speed at point Y? So after substituting the values, we get the speed at point Y, that is 3.8 meter per second. 19. The force diagram shows an aircraft accelerating. So the aircraft is accelerating. At the instant shown, the velocity of the aircraft is 40 meter per second. So it has a velocity of 40 meter per second. At what rate its kinetic energy is increasing? So rate of increasing kinetic energy. We know that rate of increasing kinetic energy means that kinetic energy per unit time, and since it is energy per unit time, so what is energy per unit time? Since energy is equal to what, so it would be energy or work per unit time. So we know that energy per unit time is power. So we need to find the value of power, that is rate of increasing kinetic energy. Rate of increasing kinetic energy, that means the power. So what is the power? We have given that this force is same as this force, so these two cancels each other out, but there is a resultant force in the horizontal direction, and we know that power is equal to force into velocity. So we know the resultant force, that is forward force, that is 500 minus 200 into 10 to the power 3, since it is in kilo, so 10 to the power 3, and the velocity, that is 40 meter per second. So after calculation we get the value, that is 12 megawatt. Question number 20. The diagram shows a simplified model of a building with 4 identical heavy floors, that is 1, 2, 3, 4 floors. The spacing of the bottom floor from the ground is twice the spacing between the floors. So this spacing is twice compared to the spacing between the floors. Then between each floor are equal number of vertical steels supporting rods of negligible mass compared with the floor. So this rod supports the floors. The rods are of different diameter, so the diameter of the rod can vary so that the stress in each rod is the same. Now you have to remember that the stress is the same. Since stress is the same, that means force per unit area is the same. since stress is the force per unit area. What is the ratio of diameter of the bottom rod to the diameter of the top rod? So to find the ratio of the diameter, we must remember that the stress is the same. That means stress at the bottom is same as the stress at the top. That means force per unit area at the bottom is same as the force per unit area at the top. So at the bottom, we can see that there is 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 forces are acting. We consider the mass of each floor as F. That means the force of each floor as F. So at the bottom rod, there are 4 forces are acting, that is 4F. And at the top rod, that means this is the top rod, there is only F is acting, that is F. So 4F by pi d square by 4, and here we take the diameter of the bottom rod as dB square by 4 is equal to F by pi d square by 4, and here we take the diameter of the top rod as dt square by 4. Then as we know that F is same in both the equation, so we cancel the value of F. Then pi is same in both the equation, also 4 is same. So diameter of the bottom, that is it comes at this place, so diameter of the bottom divided by diameter at the top is the ratio 4. So diameter of the bottom by diameter at the top square is equal to 4. So what is the diameter at the bottom by diameter at the top? That is root over 4, so it comes to be 2. So the answer is A. 21. The Achilles tendon in a rabbit's leg is stretched when the rabbit jumps. The graph shows the variation with tension of the length of the tendon. So on the y-axis there is length, and the x-axis it is tension. And you must remember that the length is in millimeter. Then what is the strain energy in the tendon when the tension is 400 Newton? So when the tension is 400 Newton, what is the tension? What is the strain energy? We know that strain energy is same as the elastic potential energy, and elastic potential energy is equal to half Fx or half kx square. Since we know the value of force is 400 and the extension, and from the graph we can see that the extension comes to be 37 minus 35, and we must convert it to meter, so half Fx, so our elastic potential energy or the strain energy comes to be 0.40 joules. So the answer should be A. Question number 22. A wave has an amplitude A and intensity I. After passing through a certain medium, the new intensity of the wave is given. So initially the intensity is I and the amplitude is A, and after passing through a medium, the intensity is I by 4. So we need to find what is the new amplitude of the wave. So we consider the new amplitude as A by A2. So this is our new amplitude, that is A2, and we know the relationship, that is intensity is directly proportional to amplitude square, and you should also remember that intensity is inversely proportional to distance square. So for now, intensity is directly proportional to amplitude square. So intensity is directly proportional to amplitude square. That means I1 by I2 is equal to A1 by A2 whole square. It is not whole square, that is A1 square by A2 square. If it is whole square, then it would be wrong, that is A1 by A2 whole square. So this would be wrong. It would be A1 square by A2 square. Remember this. Now we know the initial intensity and the initial amplitude as I and A. So I and A, and the final intensity is I by 4. We need to find A2. So A2 square. After solving, we get the value of A2, that is A by 2. So the final amplitude is A by 2. 3. Here we have given a displacement against time graph. We need to find the frequency. So what is the frequency? Frequency is equal to 1 by time period, and time period is the time taken to complete one complete wave. So from this point to this point there is one wave, but we cannot see the time value. So we move further, again there is no time value. Then again we move further, we can see that when you complete 3 waves, that is 1, 2 and 3 waves, we can see we have given time value. So it would be 3 lambda is equal to 0.4. So lambda comes to be 0.4 seconds. So lambda comes to be 0.133 seconds. That means for one wave it is this much time. So what is the frequency? Frequency is equal to 1 by time period. After substituting the value of time period, that is in second, we get the frequency as 7.5 Hz. So the answer should be D. 24. A loudspeaker is set up at the open end. So there is an open end of a closed tube containing powder. When the loudspeaker produces sound of frequency 1200 Hz, a stationary wave is produced in the tube. So a stationary wave is produced, okay. The powder gathers at the node, that means at the node there is powder of the stationary wave, and at the node there is powder, and at the antinode there is no powder. That means this is the node, and this free space is the antinode. Now the speed of the sound in air is given, that is v. We need to find the value of x. So what is x? We can see that these points are nodes. So from one node to the next node, and at the middle there is amplitude, antinode, then from that node to another node, then to other node. We can see that at this end there is antinode, and at the rest end there is node. Since the powder gathers at the node, so these ends are the nodes. So we can see that this wave is formed, and what is or how many wavelengths are formed for x? We can see that there is 1 and 1.5, that is one wavelength and 1.5 wavelength is formed. That is at point x or at a distance x, 1.5 lambda is formed. So we need to find the value of x. So to find the value of x, we need to first find the value of lambda. So what is the value of lambda? We know the v, that is 336, and we know the frequency. So we substitute the values in the equation, that is v is equal to f lambda. After substituting the value, we find the lambda, that is 0.28. So lambda is 0.28. After substituting the value of lambda in this equation, we find the value of x, that is 0.42 meter, or x is equal to 42 centimeter. So the answer should be B. Question number 25. A stationary source S emits a sound wave of frequency f. The source now moves away from the stationary observer. Which statement is correct? So here we can see that Doppler effect is acting, and for Doppler effect we know that Fo is equal to Fsv, V plus minus Vs, and since the source is moving away from the observer, so it would be plus, that means V plus Vs, that is V plus Vs. But if it moves towards, then it would be V minus Vs, V minus Vs, that is V minus Vs. But now since it moves away, so it would be V plus Vs. And as we can see that after placing a value of plus, we can see that the denominator value increases. Since the denominator value increases, thus Fo value decreases. That means the observed frequency is lower. So the observed frequency is lower than F. 26. The table lists the possible wavelength of 4 different electromagnetic waves. Which row is correct? Type of wave and approximate wavelength. So you must remember this sheet, that is for radio wave the wavelength is, that is these are given the wavelength. So for radio waves 10 to the power 4 to negative 1, then for microwaves negative 1 to negative 3, negative 2 to negative 6, 4 into 10 to the power negative 7 to 7 into 10 to the power negative 7, then negative 7 to negative 9, negative 9 to negative 12, and negative 10 to negative 16. Radio, micro, infrared, visible light, ultraviolet, X-ray, gamma ray. So you must remember this sheet. Then type of wave and the approximate wavelength. So we have given the wavelength of the waves, and the answer should be A, that is infrared radiation, because we can see that the wavelength that is given is 10 to the power negative 5. So 10 to the power negative 5 is within the range of 10 to the power negative 2 and 10 to the power negative 6. So the answer should be A. 27. A vertical tube is partially filled with water. A sound wave moves down the tube and is reflected by the surface of water. The frequency of the sound is gradually increased. So frequency increases, that means wavelength decreases. That means for the same length more waves are produced, and since more waves are produced for the same length, so frequency increases from 0 until a much louder sound is heard. Water is then removed from the tube until a second louder sound is heard. So which diagram shows the new pattern of the stationary wave formed? Now you must remember that at the open end there must be an antinode, and at the closed end there must be a node. This is for the first louder sound, and we can see that this wavelength is lambda by 4. Then this wavelength is for second louder sound, that is the second louder sound, that is 3 lambda by 4, and this is for the third louder sound, that is 5 lambda by 4. So L is equal to lambda by 2, this is the lambda by 4, then 3 lambda by 4, then 5 lambda by 4. So it increases in such a way that lambda by 4, 3 lambda by 4, 5 lambda by 4, 7 lambda by 4, then 9 lambda by 4, then 11 lambda by 4. This is a sequence of increase. And for the second loudest sound, we can say that there must be a node and an antinode at the open end, and this wave is formed. So the answer is similar to C. So the answer should be C. But if we just eliminate, then here we can see that there is a antinode formed at the open end, so this is wrong. Then there must be a node at the closed end, so this is wrong. Then there must be a node at the closed end, so this is also wrong. So the answer should be C. And the waves formed in this pattern, and if suppose that both the ends are open, then this is the first wave that is formed, that is, so this is lambda by 2, then 2 lambda by 2, then 3 lambda by 2, then 4 lambda by 2. It increases in this sequence. It is lambda by 2, 2 lambda by 2, 3 lambda by 2, 4 lambda by 2, 5 lambda by 2, 6 lambda by 2, 7 lambda by 2 in this sequence. Question number 28. Water waves in the repel tank are made to pass through a small gap. Since the waves are passing through a small gap, so the diffraction is more accurate. As shown, which diagram shows the waves after they have passed through a gap? So the gap is small, so the diffraction is more accurate, or the diffraction is more, so the answer should be A. And in option D, we can see that for this diffraction, the gap is bigger. So if the gap is bigger, then this type of diffraction is formed, and since it passes through a small gap, so D is wrong. Then in option B, there is no such diffraction pattern I have seen, so this is also already wrong. Then in option C, there is diffraction along with something that causes the wave here to bend, so this is also wrong. So the more accurate answer is A. 9. A double slit interference experiment is set up using green light. A pattern of interference fringes is found on the screen, which single change will increase the separation of fringes. So separation of fringes means the value of x. So which change would increase the value of x? So we know the equation, that is lambda is equal to ax by d, or x is equal to lambda d by a. So increase the width of each slit. It means increasing the width would increase the value of a, and increasing the value of a would decrease the value of x, since x is inversely proportional to a. Then move the screen nearer to the double slit. If we move the screen nearer to the double slit, we can see that the distance value decreases, so the value of x decreases, but we need to increase the value of x. Then in part C, use slits that are further apart. So using slits that are further apart increases a, that means the value of a increases, so the value of x decreases. But in answer D, we can see that use red light instead of green light, and we know that the wavelength of red light is more. So since the wavelength of red light is more, so the value of x also increases, since x is directly proportional to lambda. So the answer should be D. 13. Light of single wavelength from a distant point source falls normally on the diffraction grating positioned with its line vertical. So this is the diffraction grating and light from a distant point source. The plane of diffraction grating is at right angle to the incident line. That means the diffraction grating is at right angle. Then the student looks at the grating from the position near to the grating. So here is the position of the student. Which statement? What could the student see? Now the student sees a series of fine vertical lines. So the answer should be C. And I have drawn this from book, that after the light passes through the diffraction grating, it forms a fine straight lines or fine vertical lines. And if you just search from the notes or from the books, we can see that the screen is a vertical screen. That means in the screen there are vertical lines are formed. So the vertical lines are formed, so a series of fine vertical lines are formed, and this is an important question, so you must remember this. Question number 31, this is from electric field, so this is not in our syllabus. Then 32 is also from electric field, so this is not in our syllabus. Then question number 33, the unit of electric charge is coulomb. So the unit of electric charge, that is Q, is coulomb. What is meant by 1 coulomb? We know that current is equal to charge by time, so charge is equal to current into time. So 1 coulomb means that 1 ampere of charge in 1 second. So the charge passing through a point in 1 second when a current of 1 ampere. So the answer should be C. 34. Two copper wires are joined together and carry a current as shown, where P has diameter D and where Q has diameter 2D. So D and 2D. What is the ratio of average drift speed of free electrons in P by average drift speed of free electrons in Q? That is Vp by Vq. So we know the equation, that is I is equal to NAVQ, where we can see that two copper wires are joined end to end. That means they are in series and they are not in parallel. Since they are not in parallel, they are in series. So in series we can see that the current is same. So current is same. Then we can see that Q is the elementary charge, that is 1.6 into 10 to the power minus 19 coulomb. So Q is also same. Then our equation becomes, when we eliminate current and charge, we can say that V is inversely proportional to N and A. And what is N? N is the number density, that means the number of free electrons per unit volume. So we can see that for a thinner wire, the cross-sectional area or the volume is less. For a thinner wire, the volume is less, and so the number of free electrons also less. But for a thicker wire, we can see that the volume is more, and so the number of free electrons are also more. So we can see that the ratio remains the same, that is less cancels with less, more cancels with more. So the ratio basically remains the same. That means the value of N is the same. So N is the same, that means the number of free electrons per unit volume is the same. So N is also same. So V is inversely proportional to cross-sectional area. That means if we write the equation, so it would be V1 by V2 is equal to A2 by A1, or if we just remember the relationship that pressure is inversely proportional to volume, that is P1 V1 is equal to P2 V2. So V is inversely proportional to cross-sectional area, that means V1 A1 is equal to V2 A2, and V1 by V2 is equal to A2 by A1, since it is inversely proportional. After substituting the diameter of P in the A1, so diameter of P is D, then diameter of Q is 2D, so 2D. After substituting the value and cancelling the values, we get the ratio as 4. So since the ratio of Vp by Vq is 4, that is Vp by Vq, that means the mean drift speed is 4, so the answer should be 4. 35. A power supply has EMF V and negligible internal resistance is connected in the circuit shown. There is a current of 3 ampere in 4 ohm resistor. So 3 ampere in 4 ohm resistor, what is the value of V? That means the total EMF or the total voltage. So to find the total voltage, first of all, in this circuit we can see that we have given the current and the resistance, so we can find the voltage easily, that is voltage is equal to current into resistance, this V is equal to IR. So V is equal to IR, we get the voltage as 12 volt. That means the voltage in this circuit is 12 volt, and since this wire and this wire are arranged in parallel, so in this circuit there is also a 12 volt. So we know the voltage, we know the resistance. So what is current? Current is equal to voltage by resistance, that is 12 by 2. So we know the current in this resistor, that is 6 ampere, and in this resistor there is 3 ampere. So what is the total current? The total current would be 6 plus 3, that is 9 ampere. So we know the total current, that is 9 ampere. And to find the voltage, we know the current, but we need to find the resistance. So what is the resistance? So resistance of the resistor that is arranged in series plus resistance of resistor arranged in parallel, that is 4 ohm and 2 ohm. So we get the resistance. Now V is equal to IR. So we multiply I with R to get the voltage, that is 39 volt. Question number 36. Basically we have given here the original wire and the replaced wire, and we need to find the resistance of the replaced wire, that is R replaced. So to find the resistance of the replaced wire, what is the resistance of the original wire? Resistance is equal to resistivity into length by cross-sectional area. So after substituting these values, we get the resistance of the first wire as given, that is R. Then what is the resistance of the second wire? We need to just substitute the values in the equation, that is resistance is equal to resistivity into length by cross-sectional area. where cross-sectional area is pi d square by 4. So after substituting the value, we get the resistance of the second wire as given. Then what is the resistance of the second wire in terms of R? So we can see that if we compare this equation, then we can see that the first wire is 4 times greater. That means the 4 times greater is R. Since it is multiplied by 4, so 4 is equal to R. So what is 2? 2 is equal to R by 2. That is R by 4 into 2, that is R by 2. Or if we just compare, then we can say that the resistance of the second wire is R by 2. So the answer should be B. Number 37. A fixed resistor and a variable resistor are connected in series with a cell that has an internal resistance as shown. The graph shows the variation with quantity x of the resistance R of the variable resistor. So resistance R is for variable resistor, that is R, as the resistance R increases from 0 to maximum value. What could x represent? So what is x? So as R increases, we already know that the EMF of the cell is constant. So EMF is constant. Then as the resistance of R increases, we know that resistance is inversely proportional to current. So increasing the resistance decreases the current. But here we can say that current is still increasing. So this is wrong. Current should decrease. Then in option C, we can see that the potential difference across the internal resistance. Now, the resistance of R is increased, and we know that resistance is directly proportional to voltage. So as resistance of R is increased, so the terminal potential difference increases. As the terminal potential difference increases, so it will be the terminal potential difference as the answer. So resistance of R is increased, that means the voltage across R increases, and since the voltage across R increases, the terminal potential difference increases. And initially we can see that when the resistance of R is 0, that is 0, the resistance of R is 0, but the fixed resistor has some resistance and there must be some voltage. So the terminal potential difference, instead of starting from 0, it will start from a higher value. Since the fixed resistor has some voltage due to its resistance, so it starts from a higher value and it increases. As the resistance of R increases, voltage increases, and so the terminal potential difference increases. And so as the terminal potential difference increases, so the potential difference across the internal resistance decreases. So the answer should be D. 38. Here we have given a potential divider circuit, that is potentiometer. Which range of potential differences can be obtained between terminals X and Y? So when the terminal is at this point, here we can see that the resistance across XY is 0. When the Y is at this point, resistance across XY is 0, so it must start from a 0 value. Then when Y is at this point, it has a resistance of 3 ohm. So the resistance is 3 ohm when Y is at this point. So we know that V2 is equal to R2 by R total into V total. So V total. So after calculating the value, that is R2, that is 3, by R total, that is 3 plus 1, that is 4. So R2 by R total into V total, that is 4 volt, that is given. So after substituting the value, we get the answer as 3 volt as our final answer. So the answer should be 0 to 3, that is A. 9. Radiation from radioactive source has a range of few millimeters in air and can be detected by electric field. Which radiation is being emitted? So since it is detected by electric field, that means it has some positive or negative charge. But as we can see that gamma radiation has no charge, so this is wrong. Then as we can see that it has a range of few millimeters, so it would be alpha, not a beta, because beta particles have a range of few centimeters or 10 centimeter. But here we can see that for alpha there is few millimeters, that means it can travel few millimeters. So the answer should be A. Which equation describes the process of beta plus decay? So for beta plus decay, first of all, for beta minus decay, neutron changes to a proton and beta minus particle is emitted and an antineutrino is emitted. But for beta plus decay, it would be just opposite. That means instead of neutron, it would be proton. Instead of proton, it would be neutron. Instead of beta minus, it would be beta plus. Instead of antineutrino, it would be neutrino. That means it is reversed. So after reversing this, we get our second equation, and this is for the beta plus decay. So for beta plus decay, first of all, for proton, it is made up of up and down quark. Neutron is made up of up down quark, and beta plus plus antineutrino. beta plus neutrino. So this equation is similar to C, so the answer should be C.